I was always interested in the natural world. I grew up in New York City, but we took advantage of all the, we went to the city parks, we went to the beach, we had a garden, and although I never thought of it as science at the time, I was just interested in the world around me. And once I became familiar with my surroundings, then I wanted to know more. And as I went through my schooling, that was the direction that I moved, to learn more about the world around me.
I guess I got involved in science more from a standpoint of trying to leave as many opportunities open for myself in the future as I came out of high school and things like that. So I went into biological sciences and things along those lines, but I found that I had more of an interest in the human aspects, and that led me into some things along the lines of drafting and things like that. And eventually I found that I was interested in the science of locations and things like that, and how people related to the environment. So that sort of drifted me into this, where I am today.
I think my interest in mapping started when I realized I liked looking at detail. One of the courses I took in college was plant identification, where you had to take apart the tiny parts of flowers and look at them under the microscope. And I realized that I was really fascinated by the detail. And that same concept, when you looked at aerial photographs or satellite images, where you're looking at the detail of the landscape from this different perspective, was really exciting. And that's when I first started to think, well, maybe that's something you could do for a living.
Right, I guess I was more along the lines of, as I got into school and taking a surveying class. And so I got into doing some surveying, got out in the field and started mapping things and getting the idea that actually there's a way of identifying locations on the earth that people have agreed upon, and doing that and being able to come back and applying that to mapping the things of interest. So that started in my undergraduate degree.
I didn't think I would come to Cornell ever, but I'm here. I went to, my undergraduate school was Elizabethtown College in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania, and I continued my graduate studies at the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies at Duke. And that's where I first started to learn about aerial photographs.
I think the field would be referred to as geographic information sciences. Basically, it's the science of mapping real world and putting it down into a form, whether it be a hard copy map or whether it be in a digital form on a computer or on a hard drive, so that you can then intersect and bring together different data layers all together and use them in analysis that perhaps you would not have been able to use before, having kept them in separate maps. But basically, it's being able to map the real world environment in a manner that allows you to manipulate it.
And then be able to communicate that information to your audience.
In the beginning, GIS was Geographic Information Systems, and it was referred to basically the mapping software and the data sets that comprised the data that you would use for the mapping. And it also included the people and the operating systems and the hardware. And that became Geographic Information Systems. And it's kind of morphed a little bit into Geographic Information Sciences and also into geographic, what's the newest form? There's been a number of names.
Geospatial information technologies.
Right, yeah. And things like that. And partly that's been changing over time because there have been so many advances going on, and it has worked its way into almost every aspect of our lives, because it's being used for 9/11 responses, it's being used for delivering pizzas, it's being used for everything.
For marketing, for health surveys, not just environmental problem solving.
A data set would be, it could be an analog map that contains information of thematic layer, a layer that that is identifying one specific theme or item, such as rivers or streams. That would be like a thematic layer, a data set. Or it could be a conglomeration or a compiled whole data set of a township that might include things like parcel data, it might include the rivers, might include the roads, could include the school districts and all of that type of thing. That could also be the data set. And it doesn't just have to be the spatial data and the attribute information that goes with it as well. That would be all the tabular data sets and things that would tie up to our spatial locations. So the GIS brings all that together. It allows us not to just map a thing like a CAD system or perhaps like a static map where we can only give information by symbols or by colors. With the GIS, once we get into a digital form, we can attach all kinds of attributes to any feature there, and we aren't restricted just in how it's presented in symbology as to what other information we can attach.
When you bring all these spatial data sets together, the maps, the air photos, the satellite images, or the tabular data that Steve was talking about, you're weaving these pieces of information together to tell the story about your community or about the landscape. And it could be towards answering a problem, finding the solution to a problem, or it could be just so you learn more about your surroundings and get to know it better.
GPS stands for Global Positioning Systems. And what that is a constellation of satellites that circle the Earth and provide signals and send out signals, and which can then be picked up by a receiver, something along these lines, that will give you your position on the Earth, no matter where on the Earth you are. And it will give an accurate position that you can then use for mapping purposes. And so the GPS is a tool that we can use to help assist in developing the data sets for the GIS. Because one of our major problems with developing any data sets, as we go out in the real world and start wandering fields and following streams and outlining wetlands and things like that, is to know where we are. And it kind of comes back to the surveying issue. You really need to know where you are in order to be able to come back into the office and map where you've been. So up until we had the GPS, we had to take maps in the field and sort of estimate where we were, do some orienteering type of things to figure out, well, we went in this direction for so many yards and then we turned and so forth. And we'd have to come back and map that out. With the GPS, we can take it in the field, assuming we have a good satellite lock. We can then get our information about our exact position on the Earth. We can then make notations of what we see there, what the surroundings are, classify the data if that's what we're doing, and then bring that back and upload it directly into the GIS system, and then map the information that we collected. So the GPS makes it very easy to collect data in the field accurately. And it's also a lot of fun, isn't it?